Have you ever walked through a forest and felt like you were being watched? Not by animals, not by people, but by something quieter, something older, something patient. For centuries, we believed trees were silent, passive, rooted in place with no awareness of the world beyond their bark. But modern science is revealing something astonishing. Forests may be far more connected, far more responsive, and far more intelligent than we ever imagined. And tonight, we're going to step quietly into that hidden world. Before we begin, just leave a quick comment and tell me where you're listening from. Somewhere on this planet, under another sky, someone else is drifting into this forest with you. Now, take a slow breath and imagine standing beneath tall trees at dusk. The air is cool. The canopy above filters the last light of day into shifting patterns of green and gold. Leaves move gently in the breeze, whispering against one another. The forest floor is soft with layers of fallen needles and moss. It feels peaceful. But beneath your feet, something remarkable is happening. Under the soil, hidden in darkness, a vast network stretches between roots. Fine white threads of fungi weave through the earth, connecting tree to tree in intricate patterns. This underground web, known as a mycorrhizal network, links the forest together like a living internet. Through these fungal threads, trees exchange nutrients, sugars, nitrogen, water, but they also exchange information. When one tree is attacked by insects, it can send chemical warning signals through the network. Nearby trees receive the message and begin producing defensive compounds before the insects even reach them. The forest reacts, not as isolated individuals, but as a community. Scientists sometimes call this the wood wide web. It is not metaphorical. It is measurable. Roots physically connect to fungi, fungi connect to other roots, and chemical signals move through this system in coordinated ways. Older, larger trees, sometimes called mother trees, appear to play a central role. Their vast root systems and fungal connections allow them to redistribute nutrients to younger saplings growing in shade. In some cases, dying trees have been observed transferring stored carbon to nearby relatives before they fall. It is difficult not to feel something profound in that. A forest is not just a collection of trunks. It is a network. A conversation happening slowly, silently, across decades and centuries. Trees do not have brains. They do not have neurons firing electrical impulses the way we do. But they do process information. They detect light, gravity, moisture, chemical signals, mechanical pressure, even the specific vibrations of insect chewing. In laboratory experiments, plants have been shown to respond differently to the sound frequencies associated with caterpillars feeding versus harmless environmental noise. They do not hear in the human sense, but they detect vibration, and they respond. Roots grow toward moisture gradients with remarkable precision. Leaves angle themselves to maximize light exposure. Trees adjust growth patterns based on the density of neighboring competitors. There is no central command, no brain. Yet the system behaves with coordination. Over years, forests self-regulate. They share resources when needed. They limit growth when stressed. They shift species composition based on climate and soil conditions. Intelligence does not have to look like a mind to be real. Sometimes it looks like adaptation across time. Sometimes it looks like balance. If you walk through an ancient forest, one that has been undisturbed for centuries, you may notice something subtle. The air feels different. Cooler. More humid. Softer. That microclimate is not accidental. The forest regulates it. Trees release water vapor through transpiration, influencing local temperature and rainfall patterns. Their leaves intercept sunlight. Their roots stabilize soil. Their fallen leaves enrich the ground for future growth. The forest shapes its own environment. In tropical rainforests, this effect becomes even more dramatic. Large forests generate atmospheric rivers, massive flows of moisture that travel across continents. In a very real sense, forests create weather. The Amazon does not just grow in its climate. It helps create its climate. When forests are removed, rainfall patterns shift. Temperatures rise. Soil degrades. The system is interconnected. Above ground and below. Slow and patient. Silent, but responsive. And perhaps the most astonishing part is this: trees remember. Not in the way we do, with narrative and emotion, but through structural change. A tree that experiences drought will alter its growth patterns, sometimes becoming more efficient with water in future seasons. Chemical priming allows plants to respond faster to repeated stress. Experience alters response. That is a form of memory. The forest, in its own slow way, learns. It learns the rhythm of seasons, the frequency of storms, the behavior of predators and pests. Its intelligence is not fast. It is not dramatic. It is not conscious in the human sense. But it is real. And it is patient. Imagine now that you are walking deeper into this forest at twilight. The light dims. The canopy above grows denser. Roots twist through the soil like veins. Fungal threads shimmer invisibly between them. Chemical signals pulse quietly through the network. Nothing is speaking aloud. Yet everything is communicating. The forest is not silent. It is simply speaking a language that unfolds over years instead of seconds. And tonight, as you lie somewhere far from this imagined place, perhaps in a city, perhaps near mountains, perhaps near the sea, it is comforting to remember that vast, intelligent systems exist quietly all around us. No rush. No noise. Just slow coordination. Balanced growth. Subtle awareness. The intelligence of trees does not compete. It cooperates. It sustains. It waits. And if you let your breathing slow to match that pace, you may feel something soften inside you. The forest does not hurry. It does not panic. It grows. It adapts. It connects. And you, listening now, are part of the same planet that sustains it. As the twilight deepens in the imagined forest, something subtle begins to happen overhead. The light changes. And the trees know it. Long before humans built clocks, long before we measured time in seconds and hours, trees were already tracking the movement of the sun with astonishing precision. Within their cells are molecular clocks, circadian rhythms, that measure the length of day and night. These rhythms regulate when leaves open, when flowers bloom, when sap rises. A tree does not guess when spring has arrived. It calculates. It measures daylight length down to subtle differences. A few extra minutes of sunlight each day signals the coming shift in seasons. Hormones move through the tree's tissues, instructing buds to swell or leaves to unfurl. In autumn, when days shorten, the same internal clock signals a different response. Chlorophyll production slows. Leaves shift from green to gold and red as other pigments reveal themselves. Nutrients are withdrawn and stored in roots for winter. This is not passive change. It is coordinated timing. The forest keeps its own calendar. And beneath the soil, that timing synchronizes across species. Mycorrhizal networks do more than distribute nutrients. They may help synchronize growth cycles and stress responses. Fungi connect roots across species boundaries, pine to birch, oak to maple, forming cooperative exchanges. Carbon moves through these networks like currency. If one tree stands in sunlight while another grows in shade, the sunlit tree may send excess sugars to the shaded one. If one species struggles during drought, others may support it through resource sharing. Not always. Not perfectly. But measurably. The forest is not purely competitive. It is balanced between competition and cooperation. Evolution has shaped it not as a battlefield, but as a dynamic equilibrium. And then there are the oldest among them. Ancient trees. Some bristlecone pines in the mountains of the western United States are nearly 5,000 years old. They began growing before written language in many civilizations. They survived ice ages, drought cycles, storms, and human history unfolding around them. Imagine standing beside a tree older than entire empires. Its trunk twisted by centuries of wind. Its rings recording each season like a quiet archive. Tree rings do not just mark age. They record climate. Years of drought appear as narrow bands. Years of abundant rainfall widen the ring. Scientists read these patterns to reconstruct weather patterns thousands of years into the past. The tree remembers the environment long after the season has passed. The forest becomes an archive. And the patterns inside trees follow mathematics that feel almost cosmic. Branching structures mirror fractals, repeating patterns at different scales. The same geometry appears in rivers, lungs, lightning bolts, and galaxies. A tree branch divides into smaller branches, which divide again, following rules of efficiency. Leaves position themselves to maximize light capture while minimizing shade on neighboring leaves. Roots spread in patterns that balance stability with nutrient absorption. There is elegance in that efficiency. Not conscious design, but evolutionary refinement over millions of years. Forests also heal in ways that feel almost intentional. After a wildfire, the land may look devastated. Charred trunks stand against ash-covered soil. But beneath the surface, seeds lie waiting. Some species even require fire to germinate. Heat cracks their seed coats, allowing new growth to begin. Within months, green shoots appear. Within years, young trees rise. Within decades, a new forest forms. Disturbance is not always destruction. It can be renewal. Forests regulate themselves across time scales longer than human planning. They adapt to changing climates, shifting species distribution slowly northward as temperatures rise. They alter canopy density in response to rainfall patterns. They buffer carbon from the atmosphere, acting as planetary stabilizers. When you breathe in oxygen, you are inhaling a gift shaped by forests. Trees absorb carbon dioxide through photosynthesis, using sunlight to convert it into sugars and releasing oxygen as a byproduct. This simple biochemical exchange powers life across Earth. Sunlight becomes sugar. Sugar becomes wood. Wood becomes habitat. Habitat becomes ecosystem. And through it all, the forest communicates chemically. When a giraffe grazes on acacia leaves in Africa, the tree releases ethylene gas, a chemical signal, into the air. Nearby acacia trees detect it and begin producing bitter tannins, making their leaves less palatable. The signal travels downwind. The forest responds before the giraffe arrives. Insect attacks trigger similar responses. Trees release volatile organic compounds that attract predators of the insects feeding on them. The forest calls for assistance, defense, warning, cooperation, all without sound. And then there is the underground rhythm of roots seeking water. Roots grow toward moisture gradients with precision that rivals engineered sensors. They branch where nutrients are richest. They avoid toxic zones. They interact with microbial communities that influence growth and health. The soil beneath a forest is alive. Bacteria, fungi, nematodes, arthropods, billions of organisms in a single handful of earth. This microbiome influences tree immunity, nutrient cycling, and even growth patterns. The forest is not just trees. It is a layered intelligence. Canopy, understory, shrubs, fungi, microbes, animals, all woven together. If you lie quietly in a forest long enough, you might begin to feel its pace. Wind moves through leaves like breath. Sunlight shifts slowly across bark. Roots extend millimeter by millimeter. Years pass without urgency. Forests operate on time scales that feel almost geological compared to human life. And yet, they are responsive, sensitive, alert. The intelligence of trees is not fast. It does not think in words. But it adapts continuously. It optimizes. It balances. It remembers through structure. It communicates through chemistry. It calculates through light. And perhaps the most remarkable thing is this: all of it happens quietly. No noise. No spectacle. Just patient coordination. As you rest now, imagine that same quiet intelligence operating somewhere on Earth tonight. Somewhere, a forest is shifting subtly in response to cooling air. Somewhere, roots are exchanging nutrients. Somewhere, a tree senses the shortening of daylight and begins preparing for winter. No rush. No panic. Just gradual adjustment. You are part of that same planet. Your body follows circadian rhythms just as trees do. Your cells respond to light and temperature. Your breath exchanges gases shaped by photosynthesis. We are not separate from forests. We are entangled with them. And perhaps that is the most calming thought of all. The forest does not need to move to be alive. It does not need to speak to communicate. It does not need a brain to coordinate. Its intelligence is distributed, collective, rooted in cooperation. And if you allow your breathing to slow to that forest pace, something within you may soften. The forest does not hurry. It grows. It connects. It balances. And it endures. Let your thoughts drift like leaves in a canopy. Let the hidden networks beneath your feet feel steady and reassuring. Somewhere on this planet, roots are touching roots. Fungi are weaving their quiet threads. Ancient trunks are holding memories of centuries. And the forest continues its patient conversation, whether we are listening or not. Rest now. The trees will keep communicating. The soil will keep breathing. The light will keep shifting. And the secret intelligence of forests will continue as slow, silent, and endlessly alive. Beneath the soil, the communication between trees is not imaginary. It has been measured in controlled experiments using radioactive carbon tracers. Scientists have exposed one tree to carbon dioxide labeled with a detectable isotope, then tracked the movement of that carbon through fungal networks into neighboring trees. The labeled carbon does not stay confined to one trunk. It travels. Carbon moves from tree to tree through mycorrhizal fungi, particularly through ectomycorrhizal networks common in temperate forests. These fungi wrap around tree roots and extend microscopic filaments called hyphae outward into the soil, increasing the effective surface area of the root system many times over. The tree provides the fungus with sugars created through photosynthesis. The fungus provides the tree with minerals, phosphorus, nitrogen, and water. This is mutualism. A trade. But the exchange is not random. Research has shown that older, established trees can preferentially transfer more carbon to their own seedlings compared to unrelated trees nearby. Kin recognition in trees is subtle, but experiments suggest it exists. Seedlings growing near their parent tree sometimes receive more support through fungal networks than unrelated neighbors. It is not affection. It is evolutionary advantage. Chemical signaling above ground is equally precise. When leaves are damaged by insects, the wounded tissue releases jasminates, signaling molecules that trigger defensive gene expression within the tree. Nearby leaves increase production of toxic or bitter compounds. Sometimes nearby trees of the same species detect airborne chemicals and begin preemptive defense. In one well-documented experiment, willow trees exposed to caterpillar feeding began producing defensive chemicals. Nearby willows that had not yet been touched by insects also increased their defensive chemistry after exposure to airborne signals. The signal moves. The response spreads. This is not metaphor. It is plant biochemistry. Trees also communicate stress through roots. When drought conditions occur, chemical changes in root exudates, substances secreted into the soil, alter microbial communities. Neighboring plants can detect these changes and adjust root growth patterns or water usage efficiency in response. In forests experiencing insect outbreaks, trees that are heavily attacked sometimes reduce resource sharing through fungal networks. In contrast, trees in healthier conditions may increase support to struggling neighbors. This balance shifts based on environmental context. Cooperation is conditional. Communication is dynamic. There is also electrical signaling inside plants. Though trees do not have neurons, they do transmit electrical impulses along their tissues. When a leaf is wounded, electrical signals can travel through vascular bundles at measurable speeds, triggering systemic responses throughout the organism. These signals are slower than nerve impulses in animals but faster than chemical diffusion alone. It is a different kind of signaling system. Not centralized, not conscious, but responsive. Root systems can also detect chemical gradients with remarkable sensitivity. When nutrients are patchy in soil, roots proliferate specifically in nutrient-rich zones. In experiments where phosphorus is unevenly distributed, root branching increases precisely in high phosphorus regions. Trees allocate growth strategically. They decide where to invest energy. These decisions are regulated by hormonal gradients, auxins, cytokinins, gibberellins, interacting in complex feedback loops. The forest floor is a marketplace of signals. Carbon compounds leak from roots. Microbes respond. Fungi redistribute nutrients. Plants adjust growth. And over decades, these interactions shape forest structure. In tropical forests, communication extends into the canopy through volatile organic compounds. Trees release isoprene and other gases in response to heat stress. These emissions influence atmospheric chemistry and can even contribute to cloud formation. The forest alters air composition. The altered air feeds back into local climate. It is a closed loop. Not conscious design, but emergent complexity. There is also evidence that some plants can detect vibration frequencies associated with herbivore chewing. In laboratory conditions, plants exposed to recorded chewing sounds began producing defensive chemicals even without actual tissue damage. The response was specific to frequencies associated with insect feeding. The plant is not hearing in the human sense, but it is detecting mechanical disturbance and responding. One of the most striking discoveries of the last few decades is the scale of fungal networks. A single fungal organism in Oregon, Armillaria ostoi, spans over 9 square kilometers, making it one of the largest known living organisms on Earth. Imagine that. One organism. Threads connecting thousands of trees. Living for thousands of years. When you walk through a forest, you are walking across layers of connectivity that are mostly invisible. Trees also regulate water collectively. Through hydraulic redistribution, deep-rooted trees can draw water from moist lower soil layers at night and release it into upper soil layers through shallow roots. This moisture becomes available to neighboring plants. Water sharing. Nighttime movement. Measured in field studies. Not theory. During seasonal transitions, some trees delay leaf drop if neighboring trees retain leaves longer, possibly responding to changes in light reflectance within the canopy. Light itself becomes a communication channel. Red to far red light ratios signal crowding or canopy density, influencing stem elongation and growth direction. The forest senses shadow. It adjusts posture. Seedlings in dense forests often grow slowly under shade for years, waiting. they maintain minimal energy expenditure until a canopy gap opens, perhaps after a tree falls. Then, suddenly, growth accelerates. Stored resources are mobilized. Height increases rapidly toward the light. Patience encoded in growth strategy. Trees also alter root exudates to shape microbial communities that suppress pathogens. In stressed conditions, chemical secretions change, recruiting beneficial microbes that increase disease resistance. The tree is not isolated from its microbiome. It negotiates with it. All of this unfolds without a central brain. Intelligence here is distributed across tissues, chemical gradients, and environmental feedback loops. Scientists debate whether the word intelligence is appropriate. Some prefer terms like adaptive complexity or distributed signaling. But the behaviors are measurable: resource allocation, signal transmission, stress memory, cooperation, strategic growth. And the timescale is slow. Responses may take hours, days, or seasons. But they are precise. As you imagine the forest now, remember that beneath every quiet trunk lies a web of exchange. Chemical signals pulse through phloem vessels. Electrical waves move along tissues. Carbon flows through fungal threads. Hormones adjust growth in response to light and moisture. The forest is not silent. It is simply speaking in molecules. The wind moves through leaves overhead. Roots touch roots below. And between them flows information. Not fast. Not loud. But real. And profoundly intricate. When we speak of memory in trees, we are not talking about recollection. Trees do not remember events as we do. They do not replay experiences. They do not form narratives. But they do change because of what has happened to them. And those changes persist. In biology, memory often means altered response to future stimuli based on past exposure. And trees do this remarkably well. One of the clearest examples is drought memory. When a tree experiences prolonged water stress, it alters gene expression patterns inside its cells. Certain genes associated with stress tolerance become more active. Proteins that help stabilize cell membranes during dehydration increase in concentration. Stomata, the microscopic pores on leaves, adjust their sensitivity to humidity and light. If drought returns later, the tree often responds more quickly and more efficiently. It has been primed. Scientists call this stress memory or physiological priming. The initial stress changes molecular pathways in a way that persists beyond the event itself. And sometimes, these changes last for years. At the heart of this phenomenon lies epigenetics. Epigenetics refers to modifications that affect how genes are expressed without altering the DNA sequence itself. Chemical markers, such as methyl groups, attach to DNA or histone proteins and influence whether specific genes are turned on or off. In trees, environmental stress can trigger epigenetic changes. Heat waves, drought, pathogen exposure. These events leave molecular signatures. In some cases, these epigenetic changes can persist through cell division. As the tree grows, new cells inherit the modified gene expression patterns. The memory is written not in thought, but in chemistry. Even more astonishing, some epigenetic modifications may be passed to offspring. Seeds formed after environmental stress sometimes exhibit increased tolerance to similar stress conditions. It is not full inheritance in the classical genetic sense, but it is a form of biological memory that crosses generations. A forest that experiences repeated drought may gradually become composed of individuals better equipped to handle dryness, not just through natural selection, but through stress-induced priming. The forest adapts both evolutionarily and physiologically. Trees also exhibit immune memory. When attacked by pathogens, plants activate defense pathways involving salicylic acid and jasmonic acid signaling. After the infection subsides, certain defense genes remain in a sensitized state. If the pathogen returns, the response is faster and stronger. This is known as systemic acquired resistance. It resembles a primitive immune memory. Again, no neurons, no consciousness, but altered future response based on past exposure. There is also memory in growth patterns. If a tree grows on a slope where wind consistently pushes from one direction, its trunk thickens asymmetrically to compensate. Reaction-wood forms denser tissue laid down in response to mechanical stress. Over decades, the tree's shape records the prevailing wind patterns of its environment. You can see memory in the curve of a trunk, in the density of growth rings, in the angle of branches reaching toward light. Light itself imprints memory. Trees growing under dense canopy conditions often maintain suppressed growth for years. But they retain the ability to accelerate rapidly when a canopy gap opens. Their physiology remains poised, ready to respond to increased light. This readiness reflects prior experience of shade. Seedlings grown in high light conditions develop thicker leaves with different chloroplast densities compared to those grown in shade. If light conditions change, the leaf structure adapts accordingly. Past exposure shapes future structure. Even the timing of seasonal transitions carries memory. In colder climates, trees require a period of winter chilling before they will respond to spring warmth. This mechanism prevents premature budding during temporary warm spells in midwinter. The tree remembers winter. Only after sufficient cold exposure does it unlock the next growth phase. This chilling requirement is encoded in hormonal balances and gene expression patterns that track cumulative temperature exposure. The forest keeps records in its tissues, not consciously, but reliably. There is also memory embedded in community structure. After a forest fire, the species composition that regenerates often reflects both the pre-fire environment and the intensity of the disturbance. Some trees store seeds in serotinous cones that only open after fire exposure. The next generation carries forward adaptation shaped by past flames. The ecosystem remembers disturbance through regeneration patterns. And in older forests, carbon stored in soil layers can reflect centuries of accumulated organic matter. The soil profile becomes a slow archive of forest history. Even fungal networks may retain patterns of connectivity influenced by past tree distributions. Memory, in forests, is distributed. It is written into rings of wood, into methyl groups attached to DNA, into the density of microbial communities, into the geometry of branching, into the composition of species. The forest does not remember in sentences. It remembers in structure. And because trees live so long, their memory spans centuries. A bristlecone pine that has endured thousands of winters carries within its wood a timeline of climate shifts, volcanic eruptions, and solar cycles. Its rings widen and narrow in response to rainfall. Its density changes with temperature. Its chemistry reflects atmospheric conditions long before industrialization. If you place your hand against its bark, you are touching living tissue that has been adapting to environmental signals since before recorded history. There is something deeply calming about that scale of memory. Human memory is fragile. It fades. It distorts. It disappears. Tree memory is slower. It accumulates quietly. It is not concerned with narrative. It is concerned with survival. And in that survival, there is patience. The forest does not hurry to adapt. It responds gradually, layer by layer, season by season, cell by cell. Epigenetic marks form and dissolve. Growth patterns shift. Networks strengthen and weaken. And over decades, resilience emerges. If you imagine the forest now, not just as a collection of trees, but as a living archive, a memory field, something changes in how it feels. The trunks are not just wood. They are history. The soil is not just dirt. It is stored carbon and microbial memory. The canopy is not just leaves. It is the accumulated result of countless adjustments to light, wind, and water. The forest learns, not in thought, but in form. And that learning never stops. Even tonight, somewhere, a tree experiencing heat stress is adjusting gene expression. Somewhere else, a tree recovering from insect attack is priming its defense pathways. Somewhere else, a sapling growing in shade is preparing for the possibility of light. Memory unfolds slowly, written in molecules, stored in structure, passed through time. And as you rest now, there is something soothing about knowing that intelligence does not always need to be fast or loud. Sometimes it is simply the quiet persistence of adaptation. The forest remembers without anxiety. It adapts without panic. It changes without drama. And it endures. Let your breathing slow to that pace. Slow. Steady. Layered. Like rings in wood forming year after year. The secret intelligence of trees includes memory, not a story, but as chemistry. And that chemistry hums quietly beneath the forest floor. Unseen, but alive. As the light in our imagined forest fades completely, and night settles gently across the canopy, the activity does not stop. Roots remain intertwined beneath the soil. Fungal threads continue their quiet exchanges. Water moves upward through xylem vessels in steady columns, pulled by the invisible force of transpiration. Hormones circulate. Cells divide. Molecules bind and release. The forest is never asleep in the way we understand sleep. It is simply slower. And perhaps that is the final lesson hidden in the intelligence of trees. Intelligence does not require speed. It does not require noise. It does not require a central voice directing everything at once. In forests, intelligence is distributed. It is patient. It is written in structure and sustained by cooperation. It unfolds across decades rather than seconds. It adapts without urgency. It responds without panic. The forest does not argue with the wind. It bends. It does not resist drought with desperation. It adjusts water usage. It does not fight insects with rage. It releases chemical signals and balances its defenses. There is something profoundly calming in that way of existing. To communicate without shouting. To remember without clinging. To adapt without fear. Every ring inside a tree trunk is a year lived and recorded. Every root branching underground is a quiet decision about where energy should flow. Every chemical signal drifting through air or soil is a message delivered without sound. The forest is not silent. It is simply speaking a language that unfolds slowly. And perhaps that is why walking among trees often feels restorative. Even before we understood fungal networks or epigenetic memory, people sensed something grounding in forests. The air feels cooler. The sounds are softened. The pace shifts. Our own biology slows to match it. Heart rate decreases. Breathing deepens. Cortisol levels fall. There is measurable science behind that calm. Phytoncides, organic compounds released by trees, have been shown to influence immune function and stress hormones in humans. Forest bathing, or simply spending time in wooded environments, alters nervous system activity. The forest communicates with us too. Not in words, but in chemistry. And as you lie here now, perhaps somewhere far from trees, you can still imagine that steady rhythm. The canopy above filtering starlight. The soil beneath holding moisture. The slow exchange of nutrients through fungal threads. Nothing rushing. Nothing demanding. Just steady processes unfolding according to ancient rules. The secret intelligence of trees is not mystical. It is biological. It is chemical. It is ecological. And it is beautiful precisely because it does not need to be dramatic to be profound. Long before human language, forests were communicating. Long before cities, roots were connecting. Long before clocks, trees were measuring light and adjusting growth. They will continue long after we fall asleep tonight. And long after we wake tomorrow. The forest remembers through structure. It cooperates through networks. It adapts through chemistry. It persists through time. And perhaps there is something we can borrow from that quiet endurance. The next time the world feels loud or urgent, imagine roots beneath your feet, stretching calmly outward. Imagine molecules moving patiently from one cell to another. Imagine growth measured not in minutes, but in seasons. There is no rush in the forest. Only steady expansion. Only gradual adaptation. Only life unfolding. And now, as night fully settles across our imagined canopy, the leaves above grow still. The air cools. The last traces of light disappear behind distant hills. The forest remains alive. Quiet. Connected. Remembering. Communicating. Enduring. You are part of the same earth. The same air shaped by photosynthesis. The same rhythms governed by light and dark. Let your breathing slow like wind through branches. Let your thoughts drift like leaves falling softly to the forest floor. The intelligence of trees continues, patient and unhurried, whether we are listening or not. And tonight, you can rest inside that same steady planet. Calm. Connected. Growing quietly in your own way. Good night.